Walking along a path at the roots of Pikes Peak, the words of Abraham Lincoln ring in your head. A penny saved is a penny earned. Taking the fork in the path, you intend to spend your penny at the Anselm Society Digital Pub. Inside, you hear a raucous conversation on the arts, faith, and how Sigmund Freud once mentioned that a bird in hand is worth two in the bush. Over in the corner are three people. One of them is insisting that C.S. Lewis once remarked that LeBron James is a better basketball player than Michael Jordan. And that's me, Matt Mellema, or Matthew Mellema, I should say. I'll get to that in a second. But this is Believed to See, a podcast of the Anselm Society Arts Guild. The Anselm Society is a coalition of churches across the Front Range of Colorado dedicated to one very simple goal, a renaissance of the Christian imagination. To further this goal, we do all sorts of things. Each spring, COVID permitting, obviously, we have our big Imagination Redeemed conference, which attracts folks from all across the country. We actually have our next one scheduled for this coming April 2021. Let's cross our fingers on whether it can happen, COVID permitting. We also have a regular slate of concerts, lectures, and other events, either in person when we can or online also, designed to foster love and understanding of arts and faith. And we have our own guild of artists right here in Colorado Springs. And when we aren't creating art, some of us like to podcast. And that's how we get Believed to See. To find out more about the Anselm Society, please visit us at anselmsociety.org. And while you're there, you can check out Anselm's two other podcasts, Redeemed Imagination and Speaking with Joy. And since you're already doing stuff, maybe rate and review our show or the other shows on iTunes or wherever you get your podcasts. That'd help us a ton, increase the visibility of the show. We really appreciate it, but you've heard this all already. Let's get to something, Evangeline, I think we should discuss at least in some depth.
Okay.
You may have noticed I called myself Matthew Mellema instead of Matt Mellema. I'm thinking about kind of a soft rebrand as a writer. How do you feel about this?
Oh, I have had to think through that as well. And yeah, it's kind of an odd thing when you have a very distinctive name, which Mellema is very distinctive. It's kind of an odd thing to have to rethink who you want to be. I have not changed my name yet, but it is something that I've thought about.
Oh, do you have a pen name? Do you have a pen name up your sleeve?
Well, I couldn't give it away, Matt, because if I ever had to do a pseudonym, it would be because I had to go in hiding, because I had been, I don't know, canceled or something online.
Oh gosh. Yeah.
So in that case, yet.
Yeah, maybe you should keep that to yourself. I know I'm just jealous because, Lisa Ryther in our guild, she's going to be on an upcoming podcast.
Oh,
she has this cool,
great name.
Because I started my website before I thought about a pseudonym. It's like, I could have come up with the coolest pen name. Oh, well. Matthew's a good enough start.
People often ask me if Evangeline Denmark is a pseudonym because it's rather weird.
I don't know a whole lot of Evangeline Denmarks running out there.
Yep. If you Google Evangeline Denmark, you find me. There just are not very many none other that I have run across.
Yeah, there's a Matthew Mellema who's a professor of veterinary sciences at UC Davis. So me and him have been jockeying for first position for a while.
That's kind of cool, though.
Yeah, there are dozens of us Mellemas out there in America, and we have a good brotherhood. But something there is a whole lot more than dozens of, segue, is C.S. Lewis quotations on the internet. I don't know if you've seen that. Well, I know you've seen this, Evangeline, because you were on Facebook. Yes. You travel in a lot of the same Anselm, Rabbit Room, Image Journal circles that I do. And one of the enduring things about Facebook, Instagram, the internet is C.S. Lewis quotations. How many have you seen today, you think?
How many have I seen today? Well, I've only been awake.
That was more rhetorical than anything. But the point is, there's a lot of C.S. Lewis quotations out there, and a lot of them seem a little dubious. I mean, the one I quoted about LeBron James and Michael Jordan is probably middle of the road in terms of credibility. But our guest today has this fascinating research area that he has carved out, and I'm just so psyched to talk to him about it.
Yes.
Our guest today, joining us at the table, is William O'Flaherty. Good morning, William. Thank you for joining us at the table.
Well, thank you for having me. It's a pleasure.
All right. So I gave some subtle hints about what sort of stuff you do, but maybe just in general for the listeners, maybe tell us a little bit about who you are and what you do.
Well, let's see. I guess you could describe me simply as a guy in his mid-50s who really enjoys the writings of C.S. Lewis. So would be the first thing that comes to my mind. But if you're curious about what I do that pays the bills, I have a master's degree in counseling, so I'm a mental health or family counselor currently. So that is the bread and butter.
Awesome.
All right. So
thank you for doing that.
Yes. So that
I'm
is
a mental
your
health professional, like a crusader. So thanks for what you do.
Oh, certainly.
Absolutely. And that is your day job, but you also have some very interesting niches that you have carved in the writing and Facebook world, especially with C.S. Lewis. So tell us a little bit about what you do C.S. Lewis wise on the internet.
Okay, yeah. Well, currently, kind of the main thing where people would find me, if we're thinking in terms of on the web in general, I have a website that's not quite 10 years old that I set up called essentialcslewis.com. And just speaking of names and brandings and whatnot, that's a pretty decent name. I don't know if I would change it if I had to do it all over again, but that's where people can find me mostly. And then on Facebook, I do some different niche Facebook groups. I do one to support that website, but then because of all the misquotes, as we'll be talking about, that's out there, I have a Facebook group called Confirming C.S. Lewis Quotations to have people submit questions or for me to post and remind them about, hey, this one's not really Lewis. So that's kind of the how you can find me.
Great. I cannot wait to get to that specifically. Just, I think it is so telling about our age and some of the different trends of the internet that this sort of serves as a very, very necessary one. So you talked about your love of C.S. Lewis. Maybe just tell us a little bit about your history with him. So you've done some writing about him in the past. What is it about C.S. Lewis that really fires up your imagination that way?
Well, in terms of history, I'm going to put it this way. I first came across Lewis later in life than maybe most people who have exposure to Narnia. That was my first exposure, but it was late in high school. And then I remember asking somebody in a Christian bookstore, I said, hey, this was pretty good. I'm not the best reader, which is still the case. I do prefer audio things. I said, what is a nice short book that I can read? In fact, that's how I actually picked The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe. It was actually some choices in a English class that I had to read, and it looked to be the easiest book. And so I continued that theme, and the guy said, well, hey, the Screw Tape Letters is 31 letters. They're very short, can be read in less than 5 minutes. And I said, well, sign me up. And so I bought that, and that got me hooked. I then read Mere Christianity, and then when this collection called The Business of Heaven came out in 1984, I purchased that. And that exposed me to a wider variety of Lewis on a daily basis. It's like a paragraph or maybe two. And so that was really what got me going. I eventually read the rest of Narnia on my own in college, then his sci-fi collection of works after I finished my undergraduate degree. I read Till We Have Faces in the early 90s, and there was a gap that happened to where I really didn't read much Lewis until I had a midlife crisis and started reading him again in the mid-2000s. The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, big production from Hollywood came out then. That as well as just, that midlife crisis, reading more Lewis. I wanted to kind of, collect things about Lewis to help me remember about him. So I actually started a blog that focused on facts about Lewis. And so I did it in quiz style. That led to the creation of the C.S. Lewis Minute, a blog and podcast. And then in late 2011, I eventually did what became the All About Jack podcast. That happened as I was driving down a couple-hour drive to hear another C.S. Lewis person speak, or to hear a C.S. Lewis person speak. And, let me redo that to where it doesn't sound cumbersome to me.
Yeah.
So in late 2011, I was headed down to hear someone speak about C.S. Lewis, and I had a copy of his book. And so I thought, well, there'll be some time for me to think through some questions. I had an audio recorder I was going to get his permission from my own archive to record it, and maybe during the break or afterwards, I could interview him about his book. He granted that, and then I posted it on that blog, and then I started to reach out to other people, and that led to my All About Jack podcast. And then my Central CS Lewis website started around 2012. And so that's a little bit thumbnail sketch history of my interaction with Lewis in terms of the background then that led, because I love the Screw Tape Letters, I had led a Bible study or a Sunday school class in early 2000 when I lived in Kansas City. And so I had the notes from that, and I started to work on a study guide to the Screw Tape Letters, which we hope to get to discuss at some point. But then I also had been noticing quotes, which we'll get into about how I got into that. That led to the 2018 book, The Misquotable CS Lewis.
All right. So I'm sure listeners see that like this is an extensive collection of experience you have with C.S. Lewis in writing and producing content with him in various capacities. So I definitely commend all this stuff to the listeners. So please check this out. We're going to hit on several different points during this, but one of the things I want to focus on, because I think it is so fascinating, is like you said, you wrote a book, just came out a little bit ago, The Misquotable CS Lewis, and you have one of your Facebook pages is identifying and verifying C.S. Lewis quotations. So I think, Evangeline, let me know what you think. I'm going through the list of people who have probably the most false quotations attributed to them. So there's like Abraham Lincoln, Einstein, Sigmund Freud, Hemingway, Twain, and I think Lewis is right up there at the top. Is that your experience with that too, Evangeline?
Yes, I think you're correct on that.
So 2 questions for you, William. Is that accurate that C.S. Lewis is right up there with the most misquoted? And if so, why is that? Why are there so many fake quotations about Lewis floating out there?
Well, yeah, I mean, I think he would be among the top ones that are misquoted. There have been several other books dealing with misquotes. One of the early ones was by Ralph Keyes, Nice Guys Finish Seventh, which is, I believe, don't quote me on this, we're talking about quotes, but I believe that was the original expression, but then someone changed it and made it sound nicer and whatnot. But yeah, I mean, Lewis is very quotable. He says some very concise things in his writings, but then, like some people, they build up to a point and then they make a summary, and without the context, it's not so good. And then so sometimes people try to remember, they're trying to honor him, and they share what they remember, or they see someone else claiming it's a quote by Lewis, and then they don't try to confirm it. In fact, just before we started recording, I was looking at a quote book called The Book of Quotations for People Who Hate Quotations. And in their preface, they say, while we've tried to confirm the accuracy of these quotations and attribute them correctly, this book is hardly a definitive guide, And then it says, the quotes may be inaccurate, misattributed, or completely misrepresented. So please don't use this as a resource for figuring out. It's like, this is a book of quotations. I guess we should say at least they're honest, but, so if you can't trust a book of quotations, who can you trust?
Yeah. Book of quotations, but don't quote us on it.
Yeah.
Oh goodness. So you've been in sort of the C.S. Lewis space for a while now. Like you said, your website been going for 10 years or so. Have you noticed different waves of fake C.S. Lewis quotations coming and going, or has it been consistently the same amount of fake quotations?
Well, there are some pretty common ones that keep coming up that it's just very, very annoying. And I mean, some of them, the quotes in and of themselves are pretty nice, but then just don't say that Lewis said it, but then, a lot of people don't take the time to create their own meme. But there's one about change. You can't go back and change the beginning, but you can start where you are and change the ending. Nice quotation. Lewis didn't say it.
And I've heard that one.
Yeah. But then here lately in 2020, sometime in March, someone posted something that is not at all in the style of the Screw Tape Letters. Snoops.com actually tracked down the actual person who wrote it. And then someone else somehow stamped Lewis's name on it. And so that created a big interest.
Yeah.
And then here in the month of June that we're recording. And I learned of and only tracked it down to the month before another one that claims to be from the Screwtape Letters, and it's not. And then that one has been a very popular article. We were talking before the show that I was surprised that even though the first one earlier in the year was pretty popular, it has, I think, around 25,000 views itself, but then that's been since the end of March. This one, less than a week after it was posted, had over 30,000. In fact, it stands now at 37, and that's only after like 7.5 days. And so we'll see. It seems like, even though people have been reading the article, I've had some people I noticed this morning commented on Facebook. They were sharing my article, and that it is on my website, that, they keep seeing it. In fact, one other venture I started doing not that long ago, actually this year in 2020 earlier, is 90 Seconds to Knowing C.S. Lewis, a YouTube channel that sometimes I do a special edition. It's more than 90 seconds, but this one I did try to just make it at 90. And I focused on those two fake Screwtape Letters as well as one from 2016, and just said, hey, people, this is not Lewis.
Now, as you're talking, I was forming, it's not a theory, maybe not even hypothesis, I'll call it a conjecture. Okay, it seems like with a lot of the stuff going around, a lot of the unrest, and we all know what the unrest is going on right now, I have noticed an uptick in Screwtape Letters talk, just sort of on Twitter, on Facebook. Have you noticed that too? Do you think Screwtape Letters interest is on the uptick with all the craziness going on in the world? And if so, why do you think that?
Well, yeah. As I was just commenting, people have been fascinated with the Screwtape Letters lately just by virtue of these most recent fake quotations. One that I noted that was from March, that we clearly know who wrote it. It's not even in his style. Now, the latest one is sort of in the style, except it's more of a dialogue back and forth. And the original Screwtape Letters is just written in one direction. We just have Screwtape writing to his nephew, Wormwood. And so that in and of itself is rather interesting, a kind of behind the scenes look, as I talk about in my enhanced study guide to the Screwtape Letters, that it's quite fascinating because you have a peek at kind of like the letters themselves, the real ones that Lewis wrote. It's like we're reading someone else's mail, so to speak. And then as we're reading something that is purely fiction, but he brings in a lot of truths, and you kind of look at this guy that they're talking about, or you think about who they're talking about, and you go, wow, this person's kind of weird, or maybe, I can relate to that. And so we drop our guard, and then we learn some things. And so we're reading kind of the enemy's letters, kind of like in a war, which, we are in a spiritual battle. And so there's that fascination, which is why that was Lewis's first claim to fame. He was on the cover of Time magazine 3 years before Narnia, his first Narnia book, because of the fame of the Screwtape Letters. So it was popular back then. It's getting a resurgent now, or at least the fake ones are.
Oh, goodness. I guess some resurgence is better than none, I guess. So one of the things about your book, the Misquotable CS Lewis, that I found really interesting is you had sort of a list of, several common misquotations, and you have sort of show your notes on the research of it, but you categorize them according to the type. And you had like the totally false or sort of paraphrased or so that's trying to get the different varieties of it. Can you talk a little bit about how you decided to categorize the misquotations?
Sure. Yeah. Well, the way this came about is when I first started to write about it on my website, essentialcslewis.com. This was in early 2014. I did an article called Quotes Not by C.S. Lewis, a Preliminary Examination, which was a tip of the hat to his book called Miracles, which was a preliminary something. I don't remember the subtitle. It's just not usually on there. So don't quote me on that. But anyway, so as I was collecting these, which I had several people encourage me to explore it, people like Michael Ward and Andrew Lazo, who's been on your show, that was noticing things. And then I started collecting it. And we'll talk about how I actually verified here, I guess, in a second. But as I was tracking these down, I kind of noticed there was somewhat of a pattern. And so I decided to label them as not C.S. Lewis, almost C.S. Lewis, and not quite C.S. Lewis. The not ones are those that are falsely attributed to him. He didn't write it, and as far as we know, the author is not claiming to be paraphrasing Lewis. There's one exception that I've never been able to confirm that seems to be a very good paraphrase of Lewis, but it falls into the not because we know who the author is. We don't always know who the author is, but in this one case, we definitely do. And then the almost ones are the paraphrases, which range. If I were to rewrite my book or have a second edition, I would tweak this category and maybe still call it the same, but I would maybe note kind of a rough statistic. That is, some of them in there, and I do note that there are some that are very minor alterations of quotes, well-meaning people that summarized Lewis either in talk or in print, and they didn't go back and verify it. And so some are like, we'll say 95% accurate or 90. That's not too bad. And then some are a little bit more loose with it. And then some are not so close. And so that one has a range. And then the not quite are the ones that are out of context. That is, you will find the words in Lewis. However, isolated, the full meaning of what he's saying is really taken away by just isolating it. Now, if you were given a talk and you want to share ones that I, put in the not quite category, hey, I'm not going to lose any sleep because you have an opportunity to elaborate on it. But on a meme, it kind of loses the full meaning of it and could be misunderstood. So that's how I came up with the categories.
That's great. That's great. And it is really helpful when we get down into it. And maybe we can talk about the ways, the ones that I found were especially suspect. I mean, like you said, some of these, it does seem to be a person like, they either like copied it down wrong or they're quote writing it from memory. They seem generally well-meaning. Others, it's like, did you just write this yourself and slap C.S. Lewis on? And others, they're taken completely out of context. The one that I remember seeing in your book was the one where you'll probably know this better than me, but you're talking about there can be no great knowledge achieved without sacrifice or something. It sounds like, we need to take risks and break things for the cause of knowledge. But when you look at it, it's like, yes, C.S. Lewis said that, but it was the evil uncle in The Magician's Nephew when he's talking about why he sent Polly off into the netherworld. So it's like, maybe we shouldn't use that as a legitimate C.S. Lewis quotation. Were there other like really egregious, out of context examples that you can recall?
Well, that one you are recalling it accurately. I would maybe be able to say everything about it that I'm going to say in a quick comment, unless I'm actually open my book and look at it. But yeah, as you know, it's just said by an evil character to justify why he's not going to do something, but someone else should sacrifice, for him instead. But there are several that sound like a nice, good summary of things, but they don't quite go far enough. Like there are a few other ones that actually come from the movie with Narnia.
Oh,
but,
that makes sense.
One of them is hardships often prepare ordinary people for an extraordinary destiny. That sounds nice. Reepicheep says it during the scene where Eustace has become a dragon, and Reep is trying to comfort him. But it's not Lewis. It's a very touching scene. But if you were to analyze the quote, it's like, well, hardships. People still have to make good choices, though, during that hardship. So that one, maybe if Lewis tried to say something along those lines, the fuller context would elaborate more as to, a better expression. And then another one from the movie, you doubt your value, don't run from who you are. And so, let's see, that one seems to be, self-affirming, but isolated. The quote could mean a variety of things. Again, it's found in the movie version of The Voyage of the Dawn Treader as well. Those are just a couple of quick examples. I can bring up some more here in a minute that are, misquotes. But it's just really, like you say, annoying to see these things.
I fully intend to ask you a series of questions about what you think of the movies and other adaptations before long. But especially that first one, it's like hardships often prepare ordinary people for extraordinary things. You're saying that I'm just thinking, that doesn't sound like Lewis. He wouldn't have said something like that. Do you find, like, as you do this work, that you have like a spider sense with something like, I don't think that's him. That doesn't smell right.
Oh yeah, definitely. Yeah. I mean, like, there's a couple other ones we can mention real quick, and that is, getting over a painful experience is much like crossing monkey bars. Let go to move on. That one is nowhere near Lewis at all. But
it doesn't sound like him at all.
No, not at all.
Exactly. So that's not in any movie. We can talk about Shadowlands here in a second. There are some quotes attributed to Lewis that was said in the movie, but they're not Lewis. This is screenwriter should be given credit, and it may or may not be the best summary of Lewis's beliefs. But as I was researching that one, I came across the expression "monkey bars."
Yeah.
Was first used in 1929. Lewis was born in 1898, and so he would not have been familiar with that expression. I want to say jungle gym, but I think I was doubtful as to if that was his expression or not. But that's not the point as to what his expression was. It's just the one that's used in this quote definitely wasn't him. And then there's another one that one thing we haven't noted here before I share the quote, is a side comment, is some people that you would think would take the time to confirm it, that are well respected. I could name some Christian music artists and even some other Christian leaders and to have in books. A Christian leader didn't have this one, but a popular Christian artist had this meme on their website. And I know they don't oversee every single aspect. Someone else is, farmed out or, paid to do this, but they shared the following: be weird, be random, be who you are, because you never know who would love the person you hide. It's like, really? Weird and random.
I know.
And he said that was C.S. Lewis?
Yeah. Weird and random would have had a different meaning. Lewis died in 1963. Some of your listeners may be aware of this already, but some aren't. And that is, he died the same day Kennedy died. And so weird and random would have had different meanings. More contemporary, it can have, some positive aspect, but either way, Lewis would not say that. If you really meditate on that quote, it's like, you could justify anything. I'm being weird. I'm being random because I don't know who's going to love this person.
Oh my gosh.
It's like, really, people?
Goodness.
I made some notes. Let me just, while we're rolling here, let me share this other one that is not as outrageous in the same regards, but it is in another one, and that is the quote, 30 was so strange for me. I really had to come to terms with the fact that I am now a walking and talking adult. That one's not as humorous, but when you find out, actually for this one, we know who said it. Those other two, we don't clearly know who said it. If I recall my research, I don't have it all in front of me here, but that one came out. I tracked it down to around 2005, which is when The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe came out, the Disney version. And there was an article that says Lewis, but it really came from 1996 issue of People magazine. And it was Matt Dillon who said it. He's a former teen idol. And the article in People magazine, and I'm going to quote it. This is how it's presented in the article. Quote, 30 was strange for me, says former teen idol Matt Dillon, now 32. There is no turning back. I've really had to come to terms with the fact that now I am a walking and talking adult. And so someone must have been reading People magazine and Mere Christianity at the same time, and they confused the two. I don't know.
How does one even do that? Confuse Matt Dillon and C.S. Lewis.
I hope someday I bump into Matt Dillon and I can just tell him that he has been confused for C.S. Lewis with a quotation. I'm sure he'll feel very honored. But I'm just trying to close my eyes and picture, Evangeline, to try to do this. Close your eyes and picture C.S. Lewis saying weird, random, and monkey bars. I can't do it.
I can't do it either, no.
So that gets me into the issue, like, Evangeline, do you... Again, me and you follow a lot of the same writers, and a lot of writers, part of their, internet presence is posting, this pithy quotation on Instagram with like a picture of like a lake or a flower or something in the background. Do you do that, Evangeline, or are you just sort of...
I do, and I've been actually thinking about this a lot since we were talking about posting quotes, and you only have so much space. And so you're reading along in this passage and something stands out to you. And, so you put it up on your Instagram, whatever, you make a pretty graphic. And now I'm all convicted. What have I put out there that isn't representing what the author meant? And I realize I've done this. And I'm also having this overall frustration with how we do pick out those little snippets and share them.
Well,
and there's just only so much. It hits the heart. It's like, oh yeah, I identify with that. But there's so much more beneath the surface that we're missing. And we've done ourselves a disservice in not investigating further, but it's just the culture of the time. It's so
Are you
easy.
saying I'm making you it sounds like I'm making you paranoid. It's like in some regards, but yeah.
I am. I'm like, when have I done this? Oh, I've done this.
Well, when I started my website, Essential CS Lewis, I mentioned I did a blog that was a quiz. Then I started to do a fact and as well as a quiz and then a quote. And so I went to other Lewis websites and then other places, they have a list of, 100 best or my 15 favorite Lewis quotes. And so I actually shared a few on my website before really taking the time. It wasn't because I was, trying to deceive anyone. It's, somewhat lazy, but then it's like, if someone shared a quote by Shakespeare, Einstein, or Lincoln, and I read it and I go, oh, wow, that's pretty neat. I'm going to share it because I agree with it. I don't know if they said it. I don't have Shakespeare memorized, or Lincoln or Einstein. And then even with Einstein, a lot of Christians will quote Einstein saying, God doesn't play dice, which I don't remember if that's the accurate quote or not. But for the point of our discussion here, it's like we'll use a quote because it confirms something we already believe. And that's why people often share a quote, is it confirms something that they already believe to be true. And so here is some other respected person that says it, that, we're going to share it because it carries more weight.
Yeah. Quick little snippet. I, when I was younger, worked as a copy editor, and then we called them vanity presses. Now it would be an independent press. And we had a book, and the author had a quote which he attributed to Julius Caesar, but it was from Shakespeare's play, Julius Caesar. And I was a lowly copy editor, and I, tried my best to convince this author that it was not Julius Caesar who said this. It was, in fact, Shakespeare, and he needed to credit Shakespeare with this quote. And I could not make him understand. And of course, I went to my, superiors, and they said, well, he is paying
off
to
with your
publish
head.
his book. No, they said he's paying to publish his book. If he wants that in there, it's okay. And it about killed me.
They didn't tell you to let them eat cake? No.
Oh, goodness. So I guess some questions that do sort of spring up from there, because, what Evangelist talked about, that's a very common thing for all of us who have sort of an online presence, and we want to be accurate, but also we can't do a whole lot. So can you think of some basic steps we can do to, take, at least put some guards around the quotations to see if they're accurate?
Well, yeah. Of course, I could be self-serving and say, well, people just need to buy my book. If they read C.S. Lewis, buy my book so you can know for sure, which would be great. But no, basic searching skills. Now, you do unfortunately find quotes attributed to authors that are from sources that you would think would confirm them. Like for me, one of the early ways, this is not how I necessarily do it per se, but I do often do just a quick internet search and see if there's a question as to someone else could have written it. And you can do a basic Google search. Google also lets you search Google Books. And so like for this most recent claim for Screwtape, it wasn't for the fact that before I wrote my enhanced study guide, I had read the Screwtape letters over 100 times. I knew the style and flavor, but a basic search found that no one else was claiming this was Lewis or from the Screwtape letters. And so if you do a basic search and take the time, the best thing that, I've heard many other Lewis experts say and other authors in general about other people's works is only share quotes from people where you've read the quote firsthand from the actual book. Those are a couple quick ways to avoid misquoting or misrepresenting somebody.
Okay, that makes sense.
That's
so
good advice.
in sort of my lawyer parlance, I would say those are like the reasonable precautions that, one of us could take online. But you, for your work, you go above and beyond to really confirm or, disprove some of these quotations. So could you take us through your process when you see a quotation floating around attributed to C.S. Lewis, how you would go about trying to verify if that's a real quotation?
Sure. Yeah. Well, like I said, this is not necessarily what I'll always do, but pretty commonly, because like I say, I've got the Facebook group, or if someone emails me privately or something, I will, if it doesn't look familiar, that I already know it, I will do a basic Google search, and then there's Google Books. But there are wonderful collections of quotations that have been confirmed, like there is the Quotable Lewis, which is how I came up with the Misquotable CS Lewis name for my book. There's a very reputable Quotable Lewis that Jerry Root wrote, or he didn't write, I guess you would say edited, with Wayne Martindale. I've had them on my own podcast, all about Jack. And so I can do a quick search in that. Years before that, A Mind Awake. And there's other collections of Lewis's works that I can do a quick search that will have a wide variety. But then also over the years, as they become available, I would pick up the different ebook versions of Lewis's writings. And then Logos software, Bible software, they did come out with a collection that has over half of Lewis's works. So I can do a real quick search. That one's very valuable, even though I already have the collected letters in 3 volumes. I can search those all in one, as well as all the other books that they have. And then every book that is from a Christian perspective, or it was focused on a Christian audience, is available in ebook. There are a few minor things that haven't been officially released, but I was able to get a copy, like his complete essays. I have it in one chunk place to look, but I don't have like one single file that I can search to verify. So I'll first do a basic search online to see if there's any question, and then I can do these searches in like the Quotable Lewis, or in the essay collection, or in the Logos software is kind of my go-to places.
Okay. So that is really interesting. And again, for the listeners here, you do a good job of sort of showing your work on verifying a lot of these quotations. So get a hold of Misquotable CS Lewis if you can. Really great introduction to this. And I want to switch gears in the near future to talk about maybe some adaptations of C.S. Lewis's work, but sort of putting the bookend on this topic. Is there one quotation floating around attributed to C.S. Lewis that really just sort of gets to you like, he never would have said that? That's not the C.S. Lewis sentiment. Why is this going around? I'll share mine. The one that sort of floats around there is the one about stop talking about saying that you are a body and that you have a soul. Oh. You are a soul, you have a body. That one drives me nuts because, like, C.S. Lewis never would have said something that denigrates the physical world that much. So stop it, everyone. Stop it. Is there one you have like that?
Yeah, in fact, in my book, I do talk about this. And then I did a series of articles I don't think we noted. So while we kind of joked about, please go buy my book, which would be great. If you go to essentialcslewis.com, you will find a section, and there's one page that collects the ones that I have articles that are online. The book is mostly enhanced, as well as includes ones that aren't online. But anyway, in terms of the ones that really was one actually that fooled me. And let me say the quote first and then pause dramatically to let it sink in. And people go, yeah, Lewis probably would have said that, right? Quote, education without values, as useful as it is, seems rather to make a man a more clever devil. In dramatic pause. All right. So I read that.
I heard that.
Yeah. It's like, oh yeah, well, no, wouldn't Lewis say that? But then this was early on in my research. And while I had read Lewis, I've read him a lot more since then. And so the late Dr. Bruce Edwards, who passed away several years ago, this was before he passed away, I sent him an email because someone had asked me about it. And I was like, I can't seem to find it. And I hadn't honed my skills. And frankly, to be honest, I was lazy. I thought, let me send a message to someone who knows the material better than me, and it'll save me some research. And I do give him full credit in the book. But so I emailed him, And then, because it claimed to be like, from, one of Lewis's real books, The Abolition of Man. And I think at the time I may not have had a searchable copy. I do now. But anyway, he said that, quote, I don't even think it expresses truth. Neither Lewis nor I believe there is such a thing as education without values, which is how the quote starts, right? And then he goes on to say, in other words, it's the opposite of his argument in Abolition of Man. Why would Lewis say an education without values is useful? That's the beginning of the quote. Education without values, as useful as it is, no, it's not. And so, it's not Lewis. So that one really stands out. And I think since my book came out, there was some additional tracking down as to who actually said it. Because in some cases, we know who said the falsely attributed quote to Lewis. In some cases, we don't. And then some, it's anonymous in terms of we know it's anonymous and it's not, but anyway, but yeah, but that one just like,
I'm pretty sure I've seen that as a tagline on someone's email address, like in their signature line.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm cringing.
Oh goodness. Yeah. That person has gone all in on that one.
Yeah.
So once again, check out, Misquotable CS Lewis for all this, or just, look at all the different, ways that this is online, Facebook groups. That William O'Flaherty has all of this stuff, and it's so useful. Maybe all of us, I'm looking in the mirror before posting the next CS Lewis quotations, run it through that first. But before we go, we just have a little bit of time left. I want to talk about C.S. Lewis adaptations, because it seems like, reading through your material, the films are a major source of fake quotations. I have some strong, not particularly positive views on some of the latter movies. And to cap things off, Netflix is apparently doing another reboot of this. So let's talk about that. Like, Evangeline, have you seen all the Narnia movies? They did the first 3. I saw the first 2 and was so incensed by Prince Caspian I didn't see the third. Where do you stand on those?
I have seen, I believe I've seen all of them, all 3 that they did. It's been a while though. So yeah, I'm cautiously holding my breath for the Netflix adaptation. You just like, oh, which way is this going to go?
I am a grumpy old man at heart, so I'm assuming the worst.
I know.
But I'm doing this based off of 0 objective facts. So, William, what were your takes on the movies that came out several years ago? And have you heard any of the scuttlebutt on these new adaptations?
Well, yeah, there's a couple other websites that are more devoted to just Narnia. Let me just do a brief plug for them. Narnia Web is one of them. That's the one I don't do stuff with. And then also NarniaFans.com are just 2 of several that are out there. But yeah, actually, I mean, since let me back up here. I do love the Chronicles of Narnia. I read them, like I say, in college, but it was only after the last movie came out that I started reading them again. And so the Voyage of the Dawn Treader, when I left the theater, because it had the nice little tip of the hat to the illustrator at the end, that was very good. And I hadn't, again, read all the books again very closely, that I thought it was pretty decent. Now, since then, I go, yeah, boy, they really cut corners, or they should have fought harder to do this or that. But I did do a podcast, because it's been 15 years now since the Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe movie came out. I had Dr. Crystal Downing and Dr. Charlie Starr, who are both very familiar with film, share about their thoughts. Because, adaptations are adaptations. You can't take a book and put every element on the screen. So there are some adjustments that you will need to make. But I think everyone's in agreement that The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe was the most faithful of the adaptations. I guess maybe I'm in the early, I'm kind of in the stages where I was with quotes before I took them more seriously. It's like, it's pretty close enough. It's in the ballpark type thing. And so I tend to be a little more forgiving. But now if I were to write a series of critical books on it, I would be, I guess, but so that's my stance now. And I haven't kept up since I did an interview with Douglas Gresham, which is Lewis's stepson, the Presbyterian Heritage Center had him and several other people speak on Lewis, and arrangements were made for him to be questioned twice. Dr. Don King did the first one, then they asked me to do the one on Narnia. We already knew before I stepped on the stage that there was no new news back then. So that was interesting. So we did a lot of background stuff. But I think since then, over the last 6 weeks, there have been some minor movements that I know that NarniaWeb.com has tracked. And so there's no like, here's the cast. Of course, a lot of things are on hold right now anyway. But they hadn't started filming. It is rather disappointing that Netflix hasn't done anything further with it per se. But then with people doing all the streaming because of the stay at home, although now we're going out and about as it's the end of June here. But they're maybe making more money, so they're going to be a little bit more free with it and give a lot of money. I personally was thinking, and again, I don't make films, so I wouldn't be the one to create it, but I thought with the high quality animation they do, that's very realistic, that would be a way to possibly go. I have had no indication that that's the direction that they're going to go. But the only definitive thing is that they were talking about doing the silver chair. It's really not clear, at least from what I've heard at this point, whether they're going to go with a movie or do a reboot and then do it episodic, like take The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe and do it in 6 or 8 episodes that are, an hour or 45 minutes length. That would be interesting to do. So
that would be interesting, because I'm sure the Netflix producers are listening to me right now. I would love it if they did something that was like animated instead of a live action version, because again, this is my old grumpy old man at heart opinion, but I felt that the core mistake of the films is they tried to make them epic adventures, like big battles, epic. And that's not what the stories were. And it's an adaptation, so they need to take some liberties, but I thought that was an adaptation in the wrong direction. So we'll see. There's still hope for Netflix. Again, I'm just a grumpy old man, so I'm assuming the worst, but it sounds like we're still too early in the process to know anything for sure. So we're sadly running out of time, but William, before we go, can you maybe give one last round of plugs so we can follow your work?
Okay, sure. Yeah. The best central place would be essentialcslewis.com. From there, you can get to a lot of the other different things. Maybe just plug, since we're talking about the quotes, on Facebook. If you were to look up C.S. Lewis and my Facebook group confirming C.S. Lewis quotations. And then my most recent venture is the YouTube channel, 90 Seconds to Knowing C.S. Lewis, to check that out.
All right. Well, thank you once again. And thank you, Evangeline, for joining us at the table as well. And as you can all expect, things are winding down at the Anselm Digital Pub. The fire's down to embers. The customers are trundling home. And as William Shakespeare once said, early to bed, early to rise. Once again, Believe to See is a podcast of the Anselm Society. To find out more about us, please visit us at anselmsociety.org. Thank you all once again for joining us, and I'll see you next time.